We're back.
We're back, but there's nobody here yet because, well, we were live when we started our show, and then we had technical difficulties and we had to start over. And now I'm just hoping that our guests check the email and know that they have to come in through a different stream.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, so we're having a problem with that. Is that a problem with Google Chrome?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either, but she's saying something.
Try this link. We had to reboot.
Okay.
So
okay, she's being pretty current with the email. So guys,
let's go.
Yeah, so we'll let a few people come on. So we will be doing a segment in Deconstructing Zionism series. If both guests can figure out how to get back on the stream, which I'm hopeful, we will be talking about. Oh, and now I don't have my slides because you had to redo the stream, so we don't have slides.
Where do you get? Yeah, you can pull them, right?
I could pull them, I guess. Yeah. So why don't you talk about something you want to talk about while we're waiting for them to come back? All right.
I just wanted to come in here this evening and let everybody know we've got a big, beautiful, wonderful announcement we're making tomorrow. That is a totally fake poll that came out and said Ron DeSanctimonious is ahead of me. He's totally not. It's the Wall Street Journal. They totally don't like me to begin with. So believe me, we're going to have a great announcement tomorrow. We are making America great again.
Again.
One day at a time. Believe me. So be patient. My MAGA people, nothing to fear. Ron DeSantis, DeSanctimonious, DeSatan himself stands no chance. Not against us. We're building a big, beautiful movement. It's just getting started. Believe me, we have nothing to worry about. Am I right?
Sure, you're right.
That's right, because I'm always right. And even if I'm wrong, I'm still right. Believe me. So in time, everything will work itself out. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. It's going to be a great announcement, really incredible. And be prepared. We're just getting started. Patience, people.
Okay,
Patience.
So these guys, the books that we're going to be talking about tonight, if let's assume our guests get back on our stream, these are the two books. And they're really from the perspective of people that were Zionists like me, who then realized that there's just something not so right about that and then had to dig a little deeper. And once you start peeling back the layers, it's like the whole thing comes unraveled, really. It's quite disturbing. But so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Here's hoping.
Yes, here is hoping. We will see what happens in the next few minutes, but
I can no longer check our business email on my phone for some reason. So you must have at some point changed the password like you do sometimes. Yes. Don't do that. I'm telling you, I can't check it. There's a reason I can't check it. Because I can check my personal, but I can't check the business one. It only goes back to a date from last month.
Why don't people just hang around for a couple of minutes? We said we would be right back.
Well, it took a while, and this is what happens. This is what happens when you've got tech issues and we're not on our game.
Just blame me. It's my fault.
I wasn't blaming you. I'm saying when we're not on our game and we're not being
proactive.
Professional.
Well, we are professional.
Well, somewhat. We don't have quite the studio or tech space, and we definitely don't have the tech understanding.
No, we don't. But we're learning. We're still fighting the good fight.
Yeah. So hopefully they figure out that they need to get into a different link.
Well, we sent the follow-up link, and hopefully they will check it. And obviously, the Deconstructing Zionism is a very important topic that you want to continue talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to keep sort of harping on this, guys, because it's one of those things that I feel an extra special obligation, actually, like a responsibility as a Jewish person that was a Zionist. I feel like it's almost a duty to better educate and better inform people that were like me. I do.
Yeah.
I feel like it's important for Jewish people specifically to speak out on these things. So hopefully, I don't know what's going to happen now.
Yeah, we're hoping. I know that the rabbi was there. He was in the studio.
Oh, yeah. No, he was there, but he very well might still be sitting there and not checking the email. I don't know what happened.
No, well, that live stream ended though, so there's no way.
But he might just be sitting in. I don't know how it works. I don't know, or trying to go back into that one, but then you would think he'd see the email that says to go into a new one. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know, guys. So, but there's plenty of stuff that I know you wanted to talk about that you put on our little headline that you wanted to touch on. So why not just do that? Because
apparently, there was a poll by the Wall Street Journal, which again, that's a legitimate poll, and they polled, GOP primary voters, and right now, DeSantis leads Trump by 14 points, 52-38 in a hypothetical heads-up matchup. Which, let's be honest, that's pretty much the most likely scenario regarding, how this is going to go down. And DeSantis isn't even in the race yet. Obviously, I mean, who else is in the race? Nobody else is in it right now. It's like you don't even have a minute to breathe. We can't just be on politics 24/7.
You are.
Well, I'm on it long enough. Matt, we are waiting on our guests to arrive. What about us? We're important too,
We are, but this might up. Yay! We were hi, thank you so much. Okay, the rabbi's back because we knew that this could end up being complicated.
No, but I like how
Matthew, do a new link.
I like how Matthew decides to come on here and be like, "Where's your guest?" As if to say, "Well, if your guest ain't here, I ain't staying."
There's a lot of shows that don't have guests where you would just sit there and listen to the two of us banter for any period of time. Fortunately, I don't like to do that without guests.
Yeah, I know.
Not
Talking
so
to
much.
me really sucks. So
no, it's just I've done that. And plus, I like to talk to people that I feel like they can bring something new to my party.
One can only hope. But I am doing the best I can. No matter what I do, it tells me my browser doesn't support.
Oh, that's so
sorry. Don't know what to do.
That's so weird. We have. I didn't. But I use. Do I not use Chrome?
No, we do use Chrome.
She's having trouble getting in.
I would tell her, you know what? I'd tell her to try it.
Try it on her phone?
Yeah. That's the alternative.
Yeah. Tell her to try it on her phone.
Try your cell phone. That should definitely work.
But yeah.
If we have to do a cell phone conversation, wait, didn't Scott Lively, when he came on, he was a cell phone as well?
We've had people that have to be on their cell phone before.
The cell phone technology.
I've had cell phone users in Mexico before.
Matt, I'm breaking your chops, brother. I know you're kidding.
All right. So let's start.
Let's continue our conversation about deconstructing of Zionism.
Yes.
We will discuss Trump and DeSantis after the fact. Yeah. But in the meantime, he is how would you like to describe the gentleman?
Well, I mean, other than he's a rabbi of Tzedakah Synagogue. It's Tzedakah Synagogue in Chicago. I know in Chicago. And just somebody who has, seen the light. So we're going to talk about this.
Brant Rosen, Rabbi.
It's a
Brant
rabbi.
Rosen. Welcome back to Generational Change.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Finally.
Sorry for the difficulties. Sometimes it's just we're not great at it. And then my husband has to come in and figure it out. And
no, we figured it out right away. It was definitely a connection issue and that needed to be reset. But what it happens from time to time. We're not working with a super professional studio as of right now, but we're doing the best we can. So when does Hanukkah officially begin?
I don't even know. I'm a very bad Jew.
You're bad.
When does Hanukkah start?
Sunday night is the first candle.
Okay.
Well, happy early Hanukkah. So
it's not like it's the same. You know what I mean? It changes every year. Okay, we're on a whole different calendar. It's a whole different calendar.
Whereas Christmas, you know what day it's going to be every year. So is Festivus, but then again, Festivus is on the 23rd.
Festivus is the 23rd. You know what? In all honesty, the only reason I really, as an adult, ever kept track of Jewish holidays was when my kids went to JCC preschool or went someplace where all the arts and crafts would be whatever the holiday of the season is. You know what I'm talking about? Somebody's coming home with a little mini sukkah. I know what we're doing. Yeah.
Right, a little wooden Hanukkah menorah that completely
exactly
when you use it. Yeah.
So where?
No, and I mean, I was going to start. I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with Rosalind with this book?
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. Absolutely.
Okay, so I was on a call recently. It was a huge call for Jewish Voice for Peace, and it was their members meeting, and I was very inspired because there was over 300 people were on this Zoom call, and so many of them were older people. And I was so pleasantly surprised that there were so many older people, even my parents' age, that were on this call. So that was somewhat promising. But I reached out to her on that call because I had heard of her and I had read this book. And so I wanted to talk with her too. But the thing I guess that I would start with, and this is, let's see, I went through and folded again today. Because now, see, here's the thing is now it's been a while. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about where we are now in terms of what the status is, because I know that we would like to, or a lot of people would like to say Trump made things so much worse, which I know he did. And moving the embassy was not a good move and all of those things. But they have their own internal geopolitical issues right now going on over there that are not, let's say, progressive minded. Right. So where is this right now, even with the Biden administration? Like, where are we right now in the state of Israel?
Well, it's the most extreme government. It still hasn't been put together, actually. But when it is, it will be the most extreme right-wing government that Israel has ever had. I don't think it's going to affect the United States relationship with Israel. I think that's a fairly unshakable relationship that's rooted in common interests. It's rooted in a military partnership in the region. So there's too many factors that mitigate against the United States, at least at this point, breaking off the relationship or having even this new government impact that relationship. I think really the most impacted group of people are the Palestinians. And all of the Palestinians that I speak to, both in Palestine and here, say that things have never been worse. There have been well over 200 Palestinians killed by the military, about 60 children, which is, it's hasn't been this high in a very, very long time. And I think we're going to see really dark times in the West Bank in particular, but Gaza has always been a hellhole for Palestinians.
Yeah, and it looks to me, and one of the things that that you spoke about in your book, and we didn't really get a chance to talk about it when you were here last time, was how the more, let's say, progressive-minded people in Israel are tending to be like conscientious objectors, and that you see a military that's gotten progressively much more zealot-like and less, what we would say is a good secular type of military situation, and it's gotten a lot more zealot-like. And what we're also seeing, in addition to the military violence, is the settler violence.
Right.
That is, and it's almost like it's being sanctioned because this is sort of the policy of how it is. It's almost like it's sanctioned. But talk a little bit about how the military has changed there in terms of, because I remember the people that I knew that served, they weren't like that. Back when I was there, it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to the Israeli military, there is a bit of a myth that's attached to it. I mean, we shouldn't forget that this is the military that ethnically cleansed historic Palestine in order to make way for a Jewish state, and has been occupying the West Bank and Gaza for a very, very long time. So I think there is this myth that this is somehow, you often hear it referred to as the world's most moral army, and that they show restraint. And, I think that is an image that they've tried very, very hard to cultivate throughout the years. When in truth, Israel has been one of the most brutal militaries in the world, because it has to be. It's occupying over millions of people who don't want to be occupied. One of the changes I think we are seeing, and I think it's parallel to the changes that are going on in Israel proper, is that the role of the religious factions in Israel is becoming much more prominent in the military. And I think the army used to be much, much more secular. I think Israel used to be more secular. I mean, it's still a majority secular state, but the percentage of Jews who define themselves as religious, whether it's, zealots, as to use the word that you used before, far right wing, or even just Jews that will believe that this land, God gave this land to the Jews, and that's all there is to it. The numbers of these kinds of people have increased, and I think it's reflected in the military as well, and that doesn't bode well.
No, it doesn't. And that sort of brings me to something else. This is sort of like a bigger issue when we talk about secular versus non-secular, but how can you really even have a secular state when it's a religious ethno state? Like how you, it's that's like what I call my Jews for Jesus thing. Like it's not, it doesn't really work together. And that brings me to where you're talking about, like, we have to make a choice. If you want to support the idea of a Jewish state, you need to decide that you want that, acknowledging that it cannot also be a democracy, right?
Right.
Like those two things cannot coexist. And that's really what I think people don't want to reconcile. Like they want to support, they want to have a Jewish state. They want to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, the Zionism itself is an inherently illiberal project, right? It's as you put it, it's an ethno state. It's a state that's predicated on the identity of one particular group of people. It is a people that have been religiously a religious peoplehood throughout the centuries, and it is an ethno state that needs to be founded on the majority of one group of people over the other. That's how you maintain, quote unquote, a Jewish state, is by maintaining a Jewish majority,
Yeah.
which runs right in the face of democracy, because in order to maintain that majority, you need to deal with the Palestinians, whether it's ethnically cleansing them from their homes, whether it's expelling them, whether it's putting them under military occupation and not making them citizens. So that, like you say, I think we've been looking the other way for so long, many of us in the Jewish community, because we have this image of Israel again as the only democracy in the Middle East. But when you really parse what this project is, it is inherently illiberal at its core.
Yeah, this is actually something, and I'm sad that Rosalind's not here, because in this book, and this was something I want to talk about, where she says homogenizing Jews as a single national or racial identity, inextricably bound to the state of Israel, is itself a form of anti-Semitism. And
Right.
I think that's really interesting, and it really is. It really does say we're creating our own otherhood, really. Like we didn't like it when it was done to us, but yet it's okay as long as we're in the superior, as long as we're on the winning team.
From its origins, Zionism had to make common cause with anti-Semites to a certain extent in order to create the Jewish state. Lord Balfour, for instance, the Balfour Declaration, 1917, which was issued by Britain's foreign secretary, that was promising a Jewish home for the Zionist movement. Lord Balfour was an infamous anti-Semite. He supported legislation that kept Jews out of his country who were fleeing from pogroms in the late 19th century. Zionists have had to make common cause with people who have no love for the Jews, because bringing those Jews out of their countries to this other place is in their interest. And then, of course, Christian Zionists are thoroughly anti-Semitic, but Zionists are willing to make common cause with them because, again, it suits their political purpose.
Right. And that's what this has always been. It's always been like a political agenda. And I don't think that people really understand that, because they think, that Zionism is somehow biblically based, which, by the way, as somebody who is really not a believer and very secular, the whole concept that someone's religion dictates to them that they're entitled to something is insane to me. Like, now that I think about it, like, that's crazy, because the majority of the world does not believe in your religion. So you're just sort of saying, well, my religion says I'm entitled to it, so therefore I am. Which is just like, doesn't even seem rational to me now when I think about it.
Religion as a whole is not rational.
Well,
it's not supposed to be. There's a reason they call it blind faith.
Right. But there is a meeting place. There is a common ground, because you have people such as yourself that obviously recognize this and see religion in a very different light.
Well, I believe in things like separation of church and state. I don't think historically religion has mixed well with politics. And when religion is attached, particularly to empire, we see historically that really, really horrible things will happen. And, you know, for most of Jewish history, the Jewish people have resisted fusing the Jewish tradition with empire.
Yeah.
And that all changed with Zionism. You know, Zionism is a modern movement. It's not a product of the Torah. It's not rooted in the Bible. It doesn't say anywhere that God gives the Jewish people the right to create a modern Jewish ethno-state and historic time. It is a product of modernity. And so when people say that Zionism and Judaism are inextricably linked, and therefore if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic, it's really, really important to lift up the fact that Zionism is a very, very recent movement on the Jewish scene. It's a Jewish movement, I don't deny that. But to conflate it completely with Judaism, which was a Jewish civilization that resisted for thousands of years creating a sovereign Jewish state in the land, and held that only when the Messiah comes can something like that happen. To say somehow that these two things are inextricably linked is just absolutely disingenuous and really factually wrong.
It's dangerous too. And what I actually see is it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when we talk about like this rise in anti-Semitism, because like we know that Judaism and Zionism aren't the same thing, but the more that they're sort of linked together and propagandized as one thing, that I would have to imagine as a regular person with access to just regular media, which, let's be real, is not very good. I would imagine that I might have some dislike towards Jews if I affiliated them with the state of Israel and saw what they were doing to the Palestinians. Like that would definitely leave a very bad taste in my mouth.
Right. I mean, the first thing we have to say is that anti-Semitism is wrong and horrid under any circumstance. That's absolutely, I mean, I'm not trying to excuse or rationalize attacks on Jews, even when it happens by people who think they're trying to defend Palestinians or are somehow associating all Jews throughout the world with one particular state. But having said that, you know, the irony is that Zionism was a movement that was created ostensibly to safeguard the security of the Jewish people, and it has made Jews more unsafe, both in Israel and around the world. That doesn't excuse anti-Semitism against them, but it's a tragic irony that Zionism has not solved the quote unquote Jewish question, as they called it back then. It's only exacerbated it and I'll say that the people who are suffering the most from Zionism's biggest victims, of course, are the Palestinians.
We're speaking with Rabbi Brant Rosen, author of Wrestling in the Daylight. You know, for me, just trying to be as a neutral observer as I can possibly be, you know, when I see, you know, the biggest issues regarding Zionism, of course, is that it's financially opportunistic for a number of people. People use religion as a weapon, like they use a lot of things. And one of the things that Zionists constantly do is say that you cannot separate Judaism from Zionism. And when you do that, you're perpetuating the old myth of the Jews are the chosen people, therefore everyone else is essentially irrelevant to the needs of what the Jews want to have. And so people will pay, in many ways, a political, economic, and even an actual a price regarding their own lives. That, to me, I think, only adds fuel to the already spreading wildfire that is anti-Semitism. And this is why I am vehemently for the separation of church and state. But I find all too often that maybe some of the biggest reasons why this hatred has been perpetrated on society in such a big way. And let's not discount just how terrible it is that Bibi Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel again. There really is something to be said for just how devastating these circumstances end up being as a result of a handful of very opportunistic people seeking money and power.
Yeah, and it's always been this way. I mean, these are the fruits of nationalism. You know, when groups of people stake their claim in a certain piece of land and draw their own borders and defend those borders with their own armies, we've seen historically what has happened, and we see it going on today. That's why in our core values of our congregation, one of the values is that we affirm is a Judaism beyond nationalism, that we believe in a world without borders. And we believe that actually Judaism, one of the beautiful things about Judaism is that it was born in the diaspora. It's a global peoplehood. It affirms that God can be found anywhere in the world that we, hang our hat. And it really looks at the world as our home, and that borders are artificially drawn phenomena that come and go throughout history. So, lifting up the concept of diaspora and a world without borders is something that's, I think, returning in many ways to some of the things that has made Judaism so beautiful in the first place.
So speaking of borders, something that I saw recently, I'm sure you saw too, is that J Street recently put out that they're no longer saying that they believe in the possibility of a two-state solution. And, while many of us already realize that that can't really happen, that that's not really a plausibility thing, this to me seemed like a big move in terms of Jewish organizations in this country, even going further to the left, because they were considered to be liberal Zionists. And this idea of what a liberal Zionist is what I think of as like, and I don't know if you would agree like this, during the transition that it takes to get from being a Zionist to being where I am now, right? There's this middle ground, where it's the two-state solution place, right? Like the Jews are entitled to having a state, but so are the Palestinians, right? Like that's still this plausible thing. And now I realize that that's not a plausible thing. So what do you think about the fact that J Street now just came out and finally affirmed, yeah, we've killed any possibility of a two-state solution?
Well, I think it's waking up to something that should have been obvious, 10 plus years ago, if not 20 years ago. What I would ask is, if they are giving up on the two-state solution, then what are they advocating for? Does that mean they're advocating for a democratic state of all its citizens, which is not a very radical concept, but it is for many Zionists? So the next question really is, what is it that you stand for, and how are you going to create the political will? Because that's what J Street is. It's a political organization to make that happen. And I haven't seen that spelled out. I don't think it's clear to them either.
Right.
When we talk about the two-state solution, though, I'm old enough to remember, that there was a brief window of time where the two-state solution really looked like a viable solution to the issue. This was pre-Oslo. And Oslo just dashed those hopes completely. I mean, Israel went into those negotiations completely disingenuously and used it to double down on the occupation and make a two-state solution absolutely impossible. But there was a time when the two-state solution, both by the representatives of the Palestinians and Israel and the United States as a broker, was something that was in the realm of possibility. Maybe not the perfect solution. There are no perfect political solutions. I also think the notion of two states is rooted in a concept of segregation, segregation based on identity, which again is somewhat illiberal. But historically, there have been times where, whether we're talking about India and Pakistan, or in Belgium and Ireland, that there are borders drawn and treaties signed because these two groups of people need to stay separate. Those things have happened, but Israel has just kiboshed completely any possibility of that happening. And it's been obvious for a very, very long time. So it's interesting to hear that J Street is coming around, at least to, admitting the obvious, but I'd be very curious to know what it is that they are advocating for.
What is the solution, right? Like, I believe in a single democratic place in any location, right? Like that whatever the bulk of the citizenry or bulk of residents of any location come together and form a civilization, it's a majority rule situation, however you set that up, right? Like, but from where we are right now, given what it looks like in the West Bank, given the situation in Gaza, let's say you could wave a magic wand and have, it be one democratic state. that's not something that can just happen overnight, right? Like, how would we even go about undoing, let's say, Gaza, and dealing with that?
Well, if I had a magic wand, it would be no problem.
Right.
But
But let's just say you could even get the political will. Let's just say you could get everybody in a power position to say, you know what, we have to stop oppressing these people and having an apartheid regime. We need to create a democratic state. How do we do that?
I am hesitant to spell out what I think needs to be done because I'm not a stakeholder. I don't live there. I'm not an Israeli or a Palestinian. I think they need to work out the specifics of it. I do know that from a Palestinian point of view, the right of return of refugees is absolutely sacrosanct. The Palestinians, like all other peoples, are very diverse in their politics and the religious secular divide, and there are also Christian and Muslim Palestinians, but they're fairly united on the concept of the right of return. So I think that will have to be absolutely part of the deal, with reparations and some kind of restorative process. We saw that, and again, it happens. That's not pie in the sky. It happened in South Africa. It's happened in countries around the world. Reparations and repatriation is a thing. So I do believe that will have to be part of whatever specifics are ironed out. And there needs to be full equal rights, civil rights, human rights for everybody who lives between the river and the sea, whatever that looks like, whether it's a republic or whether it's, it's a binational state, or you hear all kinds of different interesting ideas being bandied about. But the first thing that needs to happen is a recognition that the status quo can't continue, and true democracy is the ultimate goal here.
And when you say things like from the river to the sea, that has been used as like where people say, if anybody says that Palestinians should be free from the river to the sea, they're anti-Semitic, they're wanting to abolish the Jewish state. And this is a common one. Like, this is one that Ilhan Omar, I think, got hit with at one point when she had said some comment, or was it might have been Rashida Tlaib.
Either way.
Yeah, either way. But made that comment, and they never heard the end of it. And it's amazing to me how we have been able to change the narrative from one person's freedom now equates to them wanting to annihilate another group of people. Like, somehow that's the logical step. And I don't understand, like, how so many people accept that and just say, that sounds anti-Semitic to me.
That attitude, the attitude that if you give Palestinians democracy, they're just going to throw Jews into the sea. That is the exact same racist attitude that existed in this country after the Civil War, after the abolition of slavery. Southern white slave owners were saying that we're going to be murdered in our beds. It's what happened when they talked about desegregating the South. It's what happened in South Africa. It was the biggest argument against dismantling apartheid, was that there's going to be a bloodbath against white people, which never happened. Right. This is a trope. This is a racist meme that basically treats a group of people as bloodthirsty beasts, simply because they just want to live free on their own land. And I think we need to push back against that strongly and call these tropes out for what they are. Overwhelmingly, Palestinians will tell you what they want is they want to be their own home. They want to live with the same rights as everybody else. They want individual rights, and they want their national rights respected as well. Between the river and the sea, which means the West Bank, Israel proper, Gaza, no exceptions. The idea that somehow this means the annihilation of Jews is just fear-mongering. When we talk about doing away with the Jewish state, if the only kind of Jewish state we can imagine is a Jewish state that is rooted and based on the dispossession of Palestinians, frankly, I think that kind of Jewish state should be dismantled. I'd like to envision creative ways about creating a Jewish state that's not based on the oppression of another people. Again, the specifics of that will need to be worked out by the people who will be impacted by these decisions. But as a Jew, I'm implicated in the actions of this state. I feel, all Jews everywhere are facing what I believe is the most important moral issue facing our community today. It's Israel-Palestine.
Well,
Yeah.
it's perfect timing because we are
Very
going to bring
excited.
in our second guest. Technology can always be tricky.
We've had problems all night, and I feel it's been one of those days.
She is the author
Well,
of
this is a collection of stories, history, and poetry and art, and she's one of the editors and people that put it together. And she did write several portions in it, which are where you guys know I take notes. I take copious notes. Yeah, I've got some problems. That's the one problem with Audible.
Author of A Land with People, Rosalind Petchesky. Welcome to Generational Change.
Well, thank you. It's really a relief to be here finally. Oh my God, I thought I was a total technology idiot. This was really challenging, but maybe I'm not the only one.
No, we've had people have issues before, and I wish that I was tech savvy enough to just sort of walk people through it, but I'm not. So it's like the blind leading the blind. Like I am of really very little help. And so we started, and I don't know if you guys have met, each other.
Well, I remember you, Rabbi Rosen. Do people call you Rabbi Rosen or Rabbi Brant?
Both of those, or Brant is totally fine as well.
Okay, but I remember you from a JVP, general meeting somewhere, one of the places, Chicago or Baltimore or someplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was really wonderful to see you there. I feel like I know you even.
Yeah, likewise, Rosalind.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, you both are two people in my sort of newfound not feeling kind of like awkward and ashamed in being Jewish around people. Like this is like, there's now people that I actually feel good about this again. That's how I felt on that Jewish Voice for Peace call. Like I felt like, oh, it's okay. Like it was like the safest space ever. And I live in South Florida, which outside of Brooklyn, when I was growing up, was what we called the second largest Jewish ghetto in the country. I mean, I thought everybody was Jewish. And where I lived, everybody was Jewish. I thought everybody was Jewish until I went to college. So that was very typical for me. But one of the things I really wanted to ask you, Rosalind, to talk about a little bit was, obviously we say, okay, at one point we were Zionists, we were taught what we were taught, we were programmed what we were programmed. And I'm very curious for you where your turning point was.
Well, it's in my story in the book, but I grew up the opposite of you in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So try growing up in Oklahoma. You think you're like the only Jew in the world. It's very strange. And I always felt, like an alien dropped down there. I grew up in a very, I would say, quite Zionist, but Reformed Jewish family. Very liberal, but very Zionist, passionate. My grandmother, my father, my uncle was someone named Maurice Friedman. He was a philosopher who wrote the biography of Buber. So we had these strains of criticism in our family. But when I was 16, the recruiters, it was before Birthright, but it was the prototype of Birthright. They would come to all over to synagogues, all over the country, and they would proselytize. I mean, they came and they told us about Israel and how wonderful it was. And I said, I want to go there. I was 16. I begged my parents, and I think they didn't really pay for both Birthright. They didn't pay for you then. I think my parents probably paid. And I went to Israel. I was 16 years old. I was very idealistic. I thought Israel would be a wonderful place. I might want to move there. And I was also, I was 16, but it was 1959. It was the earliest time of the civil rights movement. And I was in that environment. And I was aware of civil rights. And I was aware of the struggle against racism, although we called it prejudice. And I went to Israel, very naive, and I witnessed racism. And it was racism of Jews against other Jews. They just happened to be dark-skinned. They happened to be African. And I was appalled, and I couldn't believe it. And I said, what's going on? And when I came back to Tulsa, I gave a bunch of talks in the school and in the synagogue. And one of the talks I gave was to the rabbi and some elderly people. And I was just telling them what I saw. And the rabbi, apparently this woman was quite upset with what I had said. And he wrote her a letter, said, don't worry about it. Don't pay attention. She's just a young girl. I was just there. It's not true, anything she says. And that was the turning point. And I realized I was being dismissed, not only as, a heretic in my community, but as a know-nothing girl. And so I consider that the beginning of my feminism as well as my anti-Zionism. And then when I went to college, my mentor in college was Ibrahim Abulagud, who was a great Palestinian intellectual. And it just went from there. I had Palestinian students when I was teaching at Hunter College. They were great. Rabbi Abdul Hadi and Suher Hamad and Rihan Barghouti. And, and then, I got more and more involved. And eventually it was 2013 was the real, 2013, I got involved in JVP. In a campaign against TIAA, CREF, and for BDS, and then got very involved in JVP, and it's been amazing to be part of Jewish Voice for Peace.
Yeah, it's special. So let's talk about BDS a little bit, because that's something that is very, very frustrating. We as Jewish people that support that as a movement, you get talking points like, but what about this place? Or what the whataboutism is off the charts, but you say that, why aren't you boycotting this country or that country? And so, Rabbi, if you would, and this is something you spoke about in your book, the origins of BDS, it's not as such like a bunch of like white people all got together and said, we're going to fight and we're going to boycott Israel, right? Like this, talk about the origins of this, because like, this is why it doesn't make sense to me when they say, well, you support other countries. Well, I would if they had one.
Right. BDS is about solidarity. So the origins of the BDS call go back to 2006, I believe, was the origin.
2005, I think.
2005.
Yeah.
It was a consortium of Palestinian civil society organizations and groups, and they put together a call to the world asking for solidarity. And there were three basic goals to this call. One was equal rights for Palestinian citizens of Israel. The second was the end to the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. And the third was recognizing the right of return of Palestinian refugees. It addressed basically the three main populations of Palestinians, citizens of Israel under occupation and refugees. And they used a time-honored form of nonviolent resistance as part of their call, which is boycott, divestment, and sanctions. It was based on a similar call that was made by civil society in South Africa against apartheid. And really the main question for us is, if we agree with the call, if we agree with these three basic goals, if we want to stand in solidarity with Palestinians, using these time-honored tactics of nonviolent resistance, the real question is not, well, what about this group? What about this group? The question is, are we going to answer their call or not? That's the only real question that's been put before us here. And it's a very, very typical like white person approach to say, well, we're going to determine the terms of their liberation. Well, I'll honor this part of it, but not that part of it. And it's just another form of erasure. It's another way of not respecting the agency and autonomy of the Palestinian people. They're calling for solidarity. They've put out a cry for their liberation and asking us to stand with them. And, there's nothing illegal about boycott. This country is rooted in boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott is venerated in this country. The boycott by the United Farm Workers in California. So, to call it somehow anti-Semitic or a form of violence against the Palestinian people is just nonsense.
Well, I would add to that, there is an element of not in our name. There is an element of special call to Jews in the diaspora and Jews in the United States, because this is being done in our name. We support many forms of social justice and liberation, and they don't cancel each other out. They're all connected. It's called what my friend Rabbi Abdul Khadi calls the indivisibility of justice. So you saw it in the World Cup. Palestine was everywhere. And that kind of solidarity is the only thing that's going to make real change. So if you put BDS in that context of global solidarity of all peoples seeking justice, then it makes complete sense. BDS is the tool. It's a tactic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm
Why,
sorry.
it also explains why the backlash is so fierce, because they know that this is a tactic that historically has yielded results.
It works.
It works.
Well, one of the things that's incredibly frustrating is the anti-BDS legislation that we see. I mean, you've got, I think it's 26 states right now that have laws. And I believe the case in Texas, the woman sued I think it was the county schools, the school system, and she won. But the fact that this is what people are being driven to, and it's very frustrating because this is a nonviolent protest. So you don't want to allow people nonviolent protests, but yet you're constantly complaining about how it's too scary to give them freedom because they'll be violent. And I just find that, like, so in other words, everyone should just shut up and take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very hypocritical. And actually, I mean, I know that Rabbi Brant has been to Palestine probably many more times than I have. I've been twice. But all you have to do is walk in the streets. All you have to do is visit people in the Hebron Hills or in Silwan or in many places, or walk through the streets of Jerusalem with a Palestinian friend as troops of IDF come along, and see the kind of abuse, the kind of surveillance, the cameras everywhere, and not without even witnessing the violence, which is daily, the invasion of homes with dogs and lasers. The stories were just multiple, and you hear and we get tons of witness accounts. So then you ask yourself, why are these people not more violent?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, how can they even stand it? And then you realize the whole strategy here is to make the lives of Palestinians so unbearable that they will leave. I just finished writing a letter to the New York Times. There was a op-ed in today's New York Times by Diana Boutou. She's a Palestinian lawyer. We might even have different politics. She's probably more, I don't know, more nonviolent than I am. But it was a fabulous letter, and there was an appeal to us, to everybody write to the New York Times to support her letter, because there will be pressure from the Israelis to denounce it. And just, participating in that and realizing she quotes one person who said to her, one Palestinian friend of hers, she's in Haifa, who said, I don't think we're going to be here very long. And I just wept. I mean, Palestinians are the indigenous people of the land. Jews went there as settlers. This was a plan. And it was very, very destructive from the very start. It's called the Nakba.
Well, and that's the key thing when I now talk to people about this issue. If you don't know what that means, or you don't know what that is, then we are coming at this from two completely different sets of facts. So it's really difficult then to have conversations with people with a whole different sense of history. And it's very frustrating. So that's part of why I want to do this as often as I can, because, like I say to people, you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your facts. Like what happened is what happened, but No one I know growing up knew anything about any of that. We didn't know any of that. Everything was just fine. It was all these uncivilized, primitive people that were unable to exist without our white selves coming in and saving them. And something I also learned from your book, Rosalind, was the mistreatment of the Palestinian Jews. Like, that's the thing I don't think people understand. Like, there are indigenous Jews, Muslims, and Christians that were from that area, and those Jews were not treated as the Euro Jews.
Because they weren't.
Right.
But, one of my co-editors, there are three of us who edited this book, A Land with the People, is Esther Farmer. Esther's father and grandmother were Palestinian Jews. They were originally from Hebron. Her grandmother used to tell her, we lived here together, all of us. Muslims, Christians, Jews, they were my neighbors. It was the British who started this animosity, starting, with the Balfour Declaration. And, Esther herself, just grew up in this, what to me is a remarkable family of left-wing Jews who were Palestinians and had to leave. And we have other members in JVP, many, Mizrahim, who come and have many stories. Some of those stories are in our book.
They're treated as lesser. Like, indigenous peoples in general are treated as lesser. The religion is the secondary aspect to this. They were Black and indigenous, dark and indigenous.
That's why,
or from the East.
Jen, when you talk about, you weren't taught any of this. I mean, I'll say I wasn't taught all that much about the extermination of indigenous peoples in this country.
No.
And,
right.
And these are absolutely connected. I mean, Rosalind talked about settlers. This is a settler colonial enterprise. And, if you're going to be a liberal and stand with Native peoples in this country and around the world, then you have to stand with Palestinians. Otherwise, you're guilty of hypocrisy, and vice versa. By the way, those who stand with Palestinians need to make those connections as well. It is a global movement, of a liberation movement, as Rosalind was saying. So we need to be able to connect those dots and say, this is settler colonialism. This is a pattern of behavior of locating a place for a group of people to move into and claim that space in the name of that group of people. They all maybe differ in the details, but that's the basic approach of settler colonialism, and we need to identify it, very, very clearly.
Yeah.
We're speaking with Rabbi Brant Rosen and Rosalind Petchesky. I think this would be a good opportunity to talk, as we had discussed pretty briefly with the Rabbi before, Rosalind. For those who may or may not know, you may not know, Rosalind, that Jen ran for Congress in 2020 against one of the most notorious Zionists in all of politics, Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Right.
She is somebody who...
That's my congresswoman.
So when it comes to when it comes to the specific issues pertaining to, most people on the national level know Debbie for her notorious behavior as the DNC chair during the 2016
No,
election.
I assure you, they know her as Apex darling.
But she is definitely somebody who has never met a war she didn't like, and has never met an anti-BDS legislation piece that she didn't like. What is the motivating factor for people like Debbie? Because as we alluded to earlier, obviously the detriment of seeing Bibi get back into the prime minister role in Israel, I still think that most of what we do see, much like colonial settlerism, or settler colonialism, whatever the technical term would be. Apologies for my lack of linguism.
You're just a hot mess.
Yeah, I know. I'm just all over the place right now. But the motivation for the majority of these individuals is always money and power. Whatever industry they could get their hands on it in, I believe, it isn't about what religion you subscribe to. It isn't about whether you believe the Jews are the chosen people, blah, blah, blah. It's seizing on an opportunity that is going to make you very wealthy and very powerful. I believe that is Debbie's motivation more than anything else, as it is for a lot of other people in politics. She happens to be one of the most notorious. Do you see it in the same light, both of you?
Absolutely. I mean, I see what we call Zionist organizations with a powerful machinery. I see it on college campuses a lot, and universities, where the presence of these organizations inside and out has had a terrible impact on trying to, or at least attempt to silence faculty members and students and organizations and programs that support justice for Palestine. It's vicious because it's unrelenting. They have tremendous amount of money, just as they do to funnel resources to campaigns, local campaigns, as well as state and national campaigns. And it's a political machine. And I think that's how we should see it. It's a political machine, and it happens to be very powerful. And people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz don't want to lose that cash cow. They don't want to lose that source of funding because they don't have an alternative one. They haven't built another base.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
what I say. If she
really-
didn't take, well, the truth is we always say that if she didn't take corporate money, she wouldn't have any money. It's not like she's going to get a bunch of small dollar donors that go, oh, hey, I want to go give my hard-earned dollar to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. No one's doing that.
But Rosalind, how much of that, I mean, granted, the demographics in our congressional district actually did change in a very unique way in this previous redistricting cycle.
We lost a whole chunk of Jews. We lost Aventura. She lost Aventura from her district.
Which is
so
that's a pretty big deal.
she's going to take a hit on
but
that.
There's still a significant Jewish population in the towns of Plantation, in the towns of Cooper City, in the town of Weston. And the thing that's unique about these three particular communities is not just that they are Jewish, they are in many cases fairly affluent Jewish. And I do think that there is something to be said for catering to a very specific crowd that live comfortable lives, and they can focus on these particular issues that really have no bearing on their day-to-day lives, if we're being honest. But it is what you would call, in many ways, the suburban liberals' pet project. It's a
privileged position.
It's a pet project that they get involved in. And I think one thing that has worked, especially because the demographic in this particular part of the country tends to skew older, is the fear tactics tend to work very effectively. Maybe not as
the
much,
older people.
Yeah, maybe not as much as they used to, but it's still very powerful,
Yeah.
even though the younger generations are having no part of this.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a political theorist, and I think it's really important not to discount, although, I mean, I'm an old Marxist, so I definitely believe in class politics.
Sure.
But I think it's important not to discount the power of ideology and culture. And I think part of what happens here is that there's a tribalism, and it's not related to being Jewish, but a tribalism around feeling comfortable and feeling that this is your home and your base and your people who are going to support you. And you've always been there with them, and they've always been there with you. And there's a fear of being cast out. There's a fear of being ostracized. And it takes a lot of courage to turn against those constituencies that have always been there in your background. So I think it's complicated. I think it's complicated. And we have to look at those psychological and cultural dimensions of it, because they're part of what is the politics, besides the money. And the money is crucial, but these other things are too. To be called a self-hating Jew, to be called a Jewish anti-Semite, to be called an anti-Semite in this country is just, it's like the worst thing. And our job is to teach people that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are not the same, and to show the difference and the distinction between them. Zionism is adherence and obeisance to a particular state and a particular form of ethno-nationalism. It's different from religion and Jewishness and adherence to a set of ethics and beliefs and traditions. And it's so hard to get people to understand that.
The Zionists did a very good job.
Yeah.
They really did.
One thing I think that might start to change the narrative, and I hate to say it because it's tragically so, is that we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism in North America and around the world, and it's almost exclusively, white nationalist anti-Semitism, of that variety. And we're only going to see more of it. I hate to say it. I shudder to think of another synagogue being shut up the way Tree of Life was, but these are the times in which we live, and it's going to be harder and harder to keep blaming this on Palestinians. I think the rise of white supremacy is becoming very, very alarming to even mainstream liberal folk, and I think it may help change the narrative that this using Palestinians and Israel-Palestine in general as a wedge issue to use those fear tactics, I think may be less and less effective in the near future.
I also think in the inverse, this idea that somehow the existence of the state of Israel makes Jews safer around the world.
Yeah.
It's really like what we're saying is it's like the facts do not bear that, right? Like we see that it's completely different. The fact that there is this huge increase in anti-Semitism, and yet Israel has like the strongest it is as safe and secure as any country could ever possibly be, thanks to us. And yet we still see all this anti-Semitism. So clearly there's not really a link between the existence of a Jewish ethno-state and safety around the world for Jews.
But yeah, I love it when they use the trope, Israel is in a rough neighborhood. Let's unpack that. So it has a treaty with Jordan, with Egypt, with UAE, with Qatar, with almost every Arab state at this point. Probably Saudi Arabia is going to be in the near, not so distant future. So just the notion that it's somehow this tiny little beleaguered state that's surrounded by enemies is becoming...
Even though it has a huge nuclear arsenal.
And it's,
let's point out also the tremendous contradiction, the hypocrisy of wanting it both ways. On the one hand, especially for Jews in the United States, to feel, oh, it's this haven of safety. If anything happens to us here, we can go there. And on the other hand, the whole basis of the Israeli security state and of the appeal for billions of dollars from the United States is fear and insecurity, and the notion that they are under threat all the time, not from their neighbors, but from inside, from the so-called terrorists, since every single Palestinian, including infants and the dead, are considered terrorists. So, they have either they're under threat or they're safe, but which is it? So
well, I think that it's safe to say that whatever they are is at the pleasure of the United States. So Israel exists at our pleasure, which that to me translates to, let's say we were to say, okay, we're not supporting this anymore. We're not going to support this unless you actually have a nation that is democratic, right? Well, if we did that, would we have to start doing that with all of the people we like? Because Saudi Arabia, I mean, we have a lot of friends.
You mean we would end the war in Yemen?
Well,
we can't
that's a whole other can of worms. But like, we can't address this because there's just that's a rabbit hole of dictators and people that we support and prop up.
For sure, a good point, Jen. But it's also they can't because. Who is the they?
Who's the they? Us. I mean, we're the they. We could decide. We could decide that.
Right, but we have to have some support in Congress, and right now we have a handful of progressives in Congress who are willing to step up, but it's not a critical mass yet. So,
are you talking about the same people that sent Biden a letter saying, okay, we're going to approve your budget for Ukraine, but could we maybe possibly just consider the idea of diplomacy first, please? Please, we'll still give you the money. And then they had to retract that letter because it was just too stern. Are these the progressives of which we're speaking?
Well, no. I mean, there were letters actually to Biden and Blinken around Shireen Abu Ahmed, around funding for Israel. It's not, it's still a small minority.
Yeah.
But they've been speaking a little bit. And now with this government, which is just out and out, unapologetically, blatantly racist and in favor of ethnic cleansing and expulsion of Palestinians. I mean, the new, cronies of Netanyahu are ready to, before it was annexation, they were annexing a lot of the West Bank and pushing for that, but it's much more now. It's, oh God, what's the name of the Jewish religion party guy and the
Ben Gvir?
Ben Gvir and the other one too. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
No, it's ridiculous. I just wrote a letter about this.
Rabbi, did you want to jump in and say something on that we were talking about?
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about this before. I mean, I think it's going to be harder and harder to defend, but I think that it's a really daunting prospect to detach this relationship, because Israel is still an enormously important strategic asset to the United States in that region. And, that's why it's going to take a popular movement to not let go of this, that to make a difference. And we know that historically that has worked, but, I just worry that we don't really have time on our side. I think things are about to get really, really bad.
Yes, they are bad
in Palestine. And I sometimes say we have history on our side. I'm just not sure we have time on our side. And that's.
No, I think we're heading for some type of a collision course at this point. I mean, it's just kind of obvious, but like history has always shown, everything is always interconnected to the plight of the working class, whether in the States or around the world. And right now, the working class is being completely decimated, every which way you turn, and something's going to give, because people are just not going to take it forever. I mean, the Russian Revolution was a century ago. It's not to say that something like that at that significance couldn't happen again. We're seeing the protests in China. We're seeing what's going on. Iran, absolutely. We're seeing what's going on in Yemen. We're seeing what's going on here in the States. Now, people are getting tired of this. And the truth is, very often, the change only comes when the corruption is just right in your face. And right now, the corruption is right in everybody's face. They can see it clear as day, and they don't like it. And after what the president just did, claiming he was a labor president, and what he did to the railroad workers,
unbelievable.
What he just did regarding, Senator Sanders trying to bring a resolution to the floor again to end the war in Yemen, which did pass in 2018 or 2019, and Trump vetoed it. But because there's the neoliberal establishment that must be protected, we don't want to put President Biden in the same position to basically prove that it doesn't matter which major party's in power.
Right.
When it comes to foreign policy, and I always say, it's not President Biden, it's President Blinken. I believe Antony Blinken is the gentleman who basically calls the shots. And so enough people are, and the worst part about it, of course, when it comes to anti-Semitism, is that working people who are desperate will often look for a scapegoat. They will look for something that they can latch onto. But what most people don't realize is that it is a collective group of extremely powerful elites that basically run the show. And the proxy of what Israel represents to their power is extremely important to their cause. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. But I also believe that we are coming to a breaking point. Is it going to get violent? Yeah, probably.
It already is violent, and I think it's going to get more violent. And unfortunately,
it's probably what needs to happen.
Historically, when has there ever really been a real revolution where there was no violence? I don't know that happens.
I agree. It's been a long time coming since you were a young lady. I've always said that this country has been heading down this very dangerous slope since Jack's assassination in Dallas. It's just been, we haven't fully recognized that we're kind of coming to that point, because
the United States post-World War II went through a 2-decade period where things, for the most part, were heading in the right direction. Between FDR and JFK, they were. And then once he was assassinated, it's basically going down this very dangerous slope. And now the question becomes, what is it going to look like once we hit bottom? I don't know if we're close to it or not, but I know and I can feel that things are not right. And I'm getting that sense from everyday people that I talk to that are not even interested in politics, but they sense that something's really wrong. And that's
a twice impeached president is running again.
And could win again.
I'd say something is clearly wrong.
Well, and let's say the we is not just we in the United States, but it's really transnational.
Yeah.
And the more we ally with in solidarity and build coalitions with others who are feeling this and who are wanting real change, the more likely it is to happen.
Yeah.
Amen.
That's what I try to do. I try to connect as many. Yeah, that's what I kind of try to do, is connect as many pieces of a web as possible, is what it feels like. It's like this web, and the more interconnections, the stronger it is. And I just think that's the only way we have any chance of kind of getting anywhere.
Great.
Because power is going to concede nothing.
Good for you, Jen. And if you run again, we'll support you.
Well, thank you. I'm so pleased with you. Are you from, do you know Donna Neville?
Of course.
Sure.
Okay. So Donna's, I mean, I'm not going to say friendly, just knowing her from being at events in South Florida. And she was one of our earliest guests on our show. And so but I never realized how big the organization was, Jewish Voice for Peace. Like, I knew of it just because it was I thought it was her thing. And then it was just her. She's just all by herself. No.
Well, she does loom large.
Well, I mean, yeah, but, and down here, I actually met her at a protest against ICE, because we have like a lot of immigration detention centers. And so I actually met her not regarding Israel-Palestinian issue, like just completely unrelated to that. But
that's typical of JVP politics. We're in lots of things.
Yeah, I like it very much. And I have, since that meeting, have like brought in like 5 new people.
Fantastic. Well,
yeah.
Well, my phone battery is about to die.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry that you said that. Anybody, guys, if you check out A Land with the People and check out Rabbi Rosen's Wrestling in the Daylight. And guys, yeah, it's great. And they're not all that different, just so you know. It's really people coming to grips and coming to terms with this truth about something that really, like you said, Rosalind, it's in our name. Like, this is something that was our birthright, right? Like, this is supposed to be, and we need to speak up about it. And I'm very thankful to have met both of you on this path. And I hope we see each other again. I'll definitely see you at the next JVP mass meeting.
Rosalind, Petchesky, Rabbi, Brant, Rosen, thank you so much. Have a happy Hanukkah and happy holidays.
You too.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Very pleased. So look, you know what? We're getting there with our tech issues. But guys, I'm not kidding you. These books are great. And they also provide what the other thing that's also very hard, especially for Jewish people that are standing in solidarity with Palestinians, is the barrage of particular talking points that you get from people that are kind of propagandized from the Zionist movement. And these books have provided a lot of good responses that are very reasonable, very rational, based on facts, and, just really put it in perspective in terms of warding off those talking points that you get from people like the people that say, well, but they're building tunnels under the ground. And my other response used to be, well, yeah, they're born in captivity. How would you expect them to act? But no, I'm serious. These books give some really good counter arguments for the typical tropes that we get. So I was very happy to, and she's great. She also is, by the way, she said she's a Marxist and she is a professor. And this is somebody who isn't, it's not just a matter of, this is an older Jewish woman that came to terms with her Zionist upbringing.
No, but that's also
she's very educated.
Yeah, it's also the whole like Jewish geography thing, which I think, if you, depending on what does happen in 24.
Well, you saw their faces when you said Debbie Wasserman.
Oh, well, they
saw
know.
her face.
Well, that's because, again, Debbie's been very protected for a very long time. And breaking through that armor is not easy. But once you start breaking through the chinks in the armor, it's, her mail, her protection, it's probably not that strong. But when you have used fear and money for a long time, it allows you to get away with quite a bit.
Well, I am doing as much as I can to align myself as best as I can with the people that are the anti-AIPAC people, because ultimately that's what this is going to come down to. When we're sitting here talking about the money and the influence in politics, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about AIPAC and DMFI. That's it.
But if you're going to help us get there, we would be so inclined to go to patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, you can help us start that journey, potentially to Jen running again, no guarantees. But hey, even if she doesn't, there are a lot of great causes down here that we can help with, that you guys can be a part of.
Absolutely.
And if you are feeling a little bit more generous and would like to be a $10
$10 a month gets you.
And it's the holiday season, so who wouldn't want these bad boys? The Lulu sticker and the Mansion Parliamentarian.
Now, by the way,
sticker.
Mansion Parliamentarian is my pick for 24. That's who I'm voting for. I'm sticking to it. In all seriousness, I do figure I might as well vote for the most powerful people in the party.
Yeah.
Why would the party choose somebody that's less powerful than the most powerful people in the party? That doesn't make sense.
Clean coal. We'll definitely have clean coal. But if you're really feeling generous,
very generous, and you do $25, you get I'm not letting you say it because it's ridiculous. You guys, it's a very nice baseball jersey. It says, "Here comes the sun." It has our Generational Change logo on the back. And it all goes to helping us.
But it's also a tri-blend and it's comfortable.
He can't help
himself.
Come on. Do you even know what a tri-blend means? Do you even know what it means?
It sounds great.
But do you even know what that means? Think it through.
I think it's like 3 different.
Okay, you got the try. You got the try. So that's good. You got the Latin root.
So I'm going to say that it's a combination of cotton, polyester, and spandex.
Something like that. Whatever.
Okay, see, I'm not that dumb. I may be blonde. I ain't dumb.
I just wanted to give you something they're saying. It's this tri-blend, but it is actually soft. And one of the things for people, if you are in a Florida campaigning situation, when we're canvassing, especially for an August primary, to say it's hot it's an understatement that you just can't even comprehend. It's like and the humidity, you're canvassing in a steam room. It would be like you're in a steam room and you're canvassing, except you're all wearing clothes.
Have you checked the Patreon?
Not in a day or so. Do okay. I need to?
Well,
I'm not. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with that next time.
Okay.
But you think enough. We have a new person? What do we have?
Other than in chat, how can we join if you are not on Patreon? Well, if you would like to contribute to our show, one of the things that you can do is go to Cash App.
You can. Well, you don't have to, like if you're not on Patreon, Patreon's not something to be on. Anybody can go to Patreon and just patronize any show. Like you don't have to be a subscriber. It's not like you don't pay to be on Patreon. You could just come on and say, I want to give them.
Please show the 2 books again for Arthur Handy. Welcome, Arthur.
Hello. These are great books. Guys, we had both of these authors on. This one is called Wrestling in the Daylight. It's by Rabbi Brant Rosen. And it's a rabbi's path to Palestinian solidarity. I would like to say in my life, he's definitely one of the coolest rabbis I've ever met. And the other one is A Land with a People. And for anybody who doesn't know, one of the things that we're taught as young, budding, hopeful Zionists growing up, one of the things we're taught is that Israel was a land without a people for a people without a land. And that's very frustrating because there were people there.
Yes.
And not just were there people there, and even according to, if you guys go back and look on our first Deconstructing Zionism panel discussion, Professor Doug Rosen explained very well that it's not a land without people, it's a land without a people. And by a people, what it means is, yeah, there were some people there, but they weren't cohesive enough to form an actual nation. So they didn't qualify as a group of people. And therefore, we were entitled to take over their land. It's really the same thing that we did to the native people here. It's really what happens to indigenous people on every continent. Palestine was no different. It's no different. It's the same thing, except the difference is that they are still currently living in an apartheid state. It would honestly, it would be, I'm trying to think we can always think of South Africa as a reference, but I'd like to think like there would be a better reference here. Well, it's hard because we kind of are too in a lot of ways an apartheid state. So it's kind of hard. We're a lot less
Perhaps.
we're a lot less blatant about it. But if anybody ever reads books like Medical Apartheid or The Whiteness of Wealth, I got to tell you, we're pretty apartheidy. But we're apartheid in a sense that for them it's blatant. Like there literally are rights that are given to Jewish Israelis versus Palestinian Israelis.
So are you, Kay. Can't say enough. You really are an amazing supporter of our program. We wish we had a bigger audience.
Hey, and if you have any, by the way, if you have any recommendations or suggestions of anyone you think would be great, Double K, for us to talk to regarding labor or any like union people that you think would be, a good guest, by all means, tell us.
Well, we will have one of the best labor people in her wonderful state of Wisconsin. Our friend of the show, Harvey K, will be coming back for the Festivus.
Oh, yes. So, guys, we are having our Festivus coming up next Friday. So a week from Friday, we will be having our Festivus. We're putting 3 panels together. We're going to be going from 6 to 9. I'm like, kind of don't like telling people who's coming because things get moved around and changed or people cancel and whatever. So I don't want to say that, but it will be entertaining. I am making sure that all of our guests come prepared with their grievances for the airing of grievances. Peter didn't like the idea of each panel being a different part of the Festivus. Like I had this idea that we would do airing of grievances, feats of strength, and then declaring of Festivus miracles. But he didn't like that. So instead, everybody's going to get to air their grievances. And I think at every panel, there should be some sort of feat of strength and a declaration of a Festivus miracle. And if you're lucky, I might make the vegetarian meatloaf.
Well, we're counting on
the
a
vegan
lot,
loaf. So we'll see what happens, guys. But we will be celebrating Festivus next Friday, which actually is Festivus, is December 23rd.
Yes, and I think keeping with that tradition, there isn't many, but that's definitely one worth keeping. I got a lot of problems with you people.
Let me tell you, if there's ever anything I want to be known for, it's that we have an annual Festivus celebration.
Well,
okay, now what would be awesome would be to get like Jerry Seinfeld to come on our Festivus.
Why do you guys feel the need to continue this Festivus?
Actually, I'd go for any even grade B ancillary character. I'd go for like Jay Peterman or somebody like that. I'd go for any of them.
If I could pick one person, I would pick Jason Alexander.
Okay.
Like that's what I would have. I mean, God, please.
If you really wanted to pick the person, probably best be like Larry David.
We would have a much better shot at getting Jason Alexander than we would at getting Larry David. So
we have no shot of getting any of these people, by the way.
I wouldn't say that. No, I
think so?
I think Jason might consider it.
How do you know that?
6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So,
but I do think that would be really great. Okay, like in my dream universe, it would be Jerry Stiller, but he's dead, so that can't happen. But
he's passed on.
He is passed on. No, dead. I'm a journalist. We say dead. It's one of the first things you learn in journalism 101. I don't know if they still teach it the same, but I remember it. Day one, journalism 101. Took the words out of
dirtbag leftist mouth. Yes, it is too bad.
I know. And so I almost feel like I feel like I think about him when we talk about Festivus. I always think about Jerry Stiller, and that not just that character, but he was just great all around.
He was probably the best ancillary character on the show.
And they're all great. I mean, come on. Festivus.
Well, between him and Wayne Knight, I mean, obviously they were
Newman.
Hello,
Newman.
Hello, Jerry. You know the numbers on the.
No, my favorite Newman is him driving down the street singing once, twice, 3 times a lady, and the whole truck catches on fire because of the golf clubs.
Kramer, you got to get in here right now. Yeah.
But it was because the guy was throwing the golf clubs from Jerry's car, JFK's golf clubs.
Brad Garrett
was great with the Saab.
Yeah, he couldn't take the fact that Jerry was so unserious.
So guys, we have some great stuff, but yeah, if you're following the Deconstructing Zionism series, I'm very much appreciated. I'm going to keep working on bringing on new people, different organizations. I want to bring on the lady that Rachel with Zach wrote, and we're going to have to do it during the day because they actually are in Israel.
Next Monday, we will be having Rachel Lears, who is the director of To the End, which is the new documentary about the Green New Deal and the urgency that it requires at this point.
This was the woman who did Knocking Down the House.
So AOC is featured prominently. We have got a private screening, so we got a clip. We're able to watch the movie.
Exciting.
And then, of course, our main super special guest, Chelsea Manning, will be on our show Monday night. And the show will begin at 8:30 p.m. sharp.
And so guys,
there.
Yeah. But so is she scheduled to come on at
Chelsea's
9?
At 9.
Okay. So guys, seriously, this is a very rare opportunity. It really is. I don't know how many people follow this, but I have never in my life been in a situation where I watched a live stream with Chelsea Manning wherein I'd be able to ask questions. So I'm just saying, like, this is a very cool thing. This is, to me, like, there is no braver person than I've seen. Like, she's just
This
badass.
is a person literally
Just
who's been through
badass.
that. No question about it.
And had every opportunity to cave and give them what they wanted, even though it wasn't true. And she just she is my hero. Like, she is definitely a hero, like, big time.
And then, of course, Festivus will be on Friday, the 23rd. What we will do the week leading up to New Year's, well, maybe we'll do 1 show, 2 shows. We'll figure it out. You know, a lot of people will be traveling. But
My friend from my summer that spent the summer with me is coming to town on Saturday.
Very cool.
She watches sometimes, but she doesn't comment. She just watches.
Well, hey, any viewership we can get is always appreciated. So last thing before we go, obviously a lot of you guys know that the World Cup final is coming up very shortly. Probably the most noteworthy writer of World Cup soccer is Grant Wall. He unfortunately died of a coronary aneurysm. So it has been told. But I think it is very important not to get too conspiratorial, but there was the final Substack that he wrote just before he died. And I'm going to read it now. And why am I going to read it?
Wait, are you going to, like, is this a long thing?
I don't think it's that long.
Okay,
let's see.
I hate being read to. And I mean, like this in this situation, it's like, if I can chill out in my bed with my Audible, I'm good.
This is it.
Okay.
So one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Mr. Wall was somebody who was hypercritical of the migrant worker exploitation that it took to build the World Cup soccer complex, if you will, in Qatar, which is one of the most, we'll say, barbaric regimes, countries in the whole world, along with United Arab Emirates and, of course, Saudi Arabia.
That's where all the money is.
Yeah, that's where all the oil money is. So, you know,
because I also would point out that I just found out earlier today that somebody else died that I very much liked and appreciated and thought was extremely gifted. And that was Stephen Twitch Boss. I don't know if you know who he is. Twitch from... Well, he was from So You Think You Can Dance. He was an amazing dancer. Oh, yeah. And then he was Ellen's DJ on her show, basically for the duration of her show. And he committed suicide.
Yes.
And he was 40. And it makes me really, really sad. And it's a huge loss to the dance industry in this country, as far as, like, he was awesome.
All right. Well, then I guess I'm not going to do my story.
No, please read your story.
Okay. So the World Cup Daily, which was written on December 8th, I believe 2 days prior to Mr. Wall unfortunately passing away. World Cup Daily number 25. They just don't care. Qatari World Cup organizers don't even hide their apathy over migrant worker deaths, including the most recent one. Yeah, we're not even talking about worker abuse. We're talking about abuse so bad that people die. So I'd say that's pretty significant. And this is Mr. Nasser Al-Khattaar, who is the Qatar World Cup chief executive. Yeah, he looks like a real charmer, let me tell you. So Qatar, they just don't care. The Supreme Committee in charge of Qatar's World Cup doesn't care that a Filipino migrant, they're bringing in people from the Philippines.
Well, of course. What else are they going to do?
Filipino migrant worker died at Saudi Arabia's training resort during the group stage.
They're killing all the Yemeni.
He suffered a fatal blow to the head during a fall in a forklift accident, information that was kept under wraps until being broken by the Athletic's Adam Crifton. You know, of course, these types of accidents only happen in extremely unsafe work conditions. And why would the work conditions be unsafe?
I don't understand what any of this has to do with soccer.
Well, they were building, they have to build these complexes just specifically for the World Cup.
Oh, so this is sort of like when places bid on the Olympics and they have to put together a whole ridiculous...
You're learning now!
I just don't care that much about the sports games.
We know the Qatari Supreme Committee doesn't care because its CEO, Nasser Al-Khattaar, told you all you needed to hear in an interview with the BBC that was breathtaking in its crassness. That's what I said.
That baby was breathtaking.
Who says breathtaking? We're in the middle of a World Cup and we have a successful World Cup. And this is something you want to talk about right now? Talk about callous. Al-Khattaar said when asked about the worker's death, I mean, death is a natural part of life. Whether it's at work, whether it's in your sleep, of course a worker died. Our condolences go to his family. However, it's strange that this is something you wanted to focus on as your first question. He actually said that.
Well,
but al-Qatar
that's
didn't
some
stop
serious
there.
sensitivity right there.
I really think for the majority of people who look at these types of stories and get conspiratorial about what actually does happen when somebody dies conspicuously, is it possible that Grant Wall just died of natural causes? He had been complaining about his health, that he had been overworked for the past several weeks, and then all of a sudden dies of an aneurysm? I would say that it's very possible.
What does that have to do with the Filipino?
Why are you commenting like that?
Because I'm looking at, you're sitting there talking about the story about a Filipino migrant worker and that he fell to his death. And now we're talking about somebody else. And I'm not really understanding the context of any of this. So
Qatar is hosting the World Cup.
I understand
Qatar
that.
is hosting the World Cup, and they have hired slave labor
I
to
get
build
that.
their complexes. And slave labor has been dying as a result of this.
No, but
And
the person
because
you're referencing, Wall, I don't understand who that is in relation to this.
he is the soccer journalist who
The
just
journalist.
died.
Okay, that's what I'm just trying to understand, because you're going back and forth between
No,
people.
I
It's
think
like,
I've been very clear. And if you ask anybody in the audience, they would say the same
like it's
thing.
like following a story with
Well, you
Brant.
don't care because you don't like sports.
Something,
I
but
mean,
I
you
don't
like
want people to get dead.
No, and again, well, at least you like football, but
I do like football and I like basketball.
But the World Cup is a significant story right now because they decided to host this grand spectacle for which happens every 4 years. It's the most watched international sporting event in the world, even more than the Olympics. People tune in for this.
All right, guys, I hear you. I'm
and
sort
so
of in
as
and
a
out.
result, no, because you don't care, but that's okay.
I do. I care deeply.
Not in the least. And so what makes this story so significant is the fact that this gentleman who had been writing about soccer for so long decided to not write a neoliberal talking point about how wonderful the World Cup is and how this is bringing money to the local community and the working people are going to benefit
So
from
he
this.
called them out.
He called out the absolute barbaric behavior of the Qatari regime. And you do not do that.
And then he got dead.
Now, you can say what you want about how he just coincidentally happened to die within less than 48 hours of releasing that article. They want to focus on the fact that he walked around town with a rainbow flag on. Yeah, that's going to piss off a lot of people, but they're not going to kill somebody over that.
I don't know. In over there, I don't know that to be true.
That's not something that's going to affect their bottom line. But calling out the fact that you employ slave labor and you're actually killing people in the process because you simply are so barbaric in your labor methods, that's not going to sit well at all.
I'm going to explain the real reason I have a problem like dealing with soccer, because like here, Patty P, soccer is huge. I know soccer is huge. And when you guys say soccer, it's all great. But the thing is that the rest of the world calls it football. And I feel like in order for me to be an authentic fan of soccer, I would have to call it football. And I can't do that because I follow football.
It's not a question of caring about soccer. It's about caring about working migrants around the world.
Well, that's
that
what
are
I said. I was trying
like
to understand.
animals.
This I do have a
that
problem
you can
with.
just slaughter at any time. And the callous reaction to this gentleman, I wouldn't even call him a gentleman because he's not worthy of that statement, but the head of the World Cup committee in Qatar is clearly somebody who doesn't value human life. He values money and power like so many other people.
Bet you anything he has a concubine.
Whatever he has.
Bet you anything he has like actually a harem of concubines.
Man, can't you just half-heartedly take what I'm trying to do seriously?
I am taking it seriously. This is not somebody who cares about human rights, but it doesn't mean we can't be remotely entertaining while we're talking about it.
I still think it's a very important topic because, again, it relates to the fact that this gentleman may have paid for it with his life, that he was willing to call out the absolute horrific treatment of labor that exists all over the world. And this is no exception. But this is extremely bad because people were saying forever, do not let Qatar get the World Cup. Don't let them get it. But people want their stupid money and their stupid power, and they're willing to sacrifice their morals and values in order to get it. Look at what Phil Mickelson did. Look at what's going on with the Saudi Arabia Gulf.
Is that the live thing?
Yes.
See, I pay attention. I understand. I read a whole thing about that because it has to do with Greg Norman. I was reading this whole thing with Greg Norman. And they're basically like defending it and saying why nobody should be upset that they're basically in bed with the Saudis. I don't know, the whole thing reeks of elitist filth to me.
It is elitist filth.
So I don't really to me, again, I don't care what language my oligarchs speak or what country they're from. It matters not to me. They're still treating the peasants horribly. So it doesn't matter what country they're in. That's my point.
Yeah, well, they're killing them. And this journalist decided to do real journalism and say, yeah, they're killing them. And it's a tragedy that it's happening. And then the next thing you know, he's dead. I don't know what to make of it. I know everyone's going to say, oh, it's just a conspiracy. He died of natural causes. Maybe.
I think they'd probably Jamal Khashoggi'd him.
Maybe not. But you better damn believe that much like President Trump didn't say anything about Khashoggi, President Biden is not going to say anything about Grant Wall. Not happening. The second you realize who funds this country and funds the world.
Why isn't American football played with people? Because American football isn't really football. It's really more like rugby with helmets and shoulder pads. It's
American rugby.
It's wussy
really
rugby.
No, I don't. Why do you say that?
Because they have helmets and shoulder pads. And in rugby, they just go bare bones, man. That to me is more badass. I'm sorry, but it is. It's like there's a difference between like the like street fighters and stuff, and when you have and you're sparring with like gloves and helmets.
Correct, Patty. The World Cup. That is not where people wanted it, but they got it there anyway because the money is just so.
Well, but isn't that really it's no different than when we're dealing with things with the Olympics in terms of like arguing over who gets to have it based on some moral high ground, as if we have one to stand on.
Yeah.
That's what's fascinating to me. Like, where do we get off having some sort of moral high ground about anything having to do with human rights whatsoever? I just don't understand. Oh, this is something I wanted to talk about. So did you ever research into what Ron DeSantis' military history is?
Apparently he was involved with the torture program at Guantanamo Bay. Now that will come out when he runs for president.
Well, that's already out. It's not a secret. And no, he did not participate in torture. He was an attorney there, basically there to justify said actions. So, that to me is not a good thing. But my point is that civil rights and human rights abuses run rife in this country, all over the place. So we have no position. That's why, what does it matter what Qatar does? We don't treat our own people right.
No,
we don't. Flint doesn't have clean water. So for us to sit there and be like, somehow we're just so on some moral high horse that we shouldn't allow places like third world Qatar and their, barbaric ways to host a World Cup. I don't know. Do their people have clean water? Their people might have clean water. Maybe to them, we're barbarians. I don't know, but we're not the good guys.
Are we the baddies?
Well, I think it's not a matter of good or bad. It's a matter of just imperial colonialist. That's what it is. It's not good or bad. It just is. From the perspective of the colonized, I'd say it's quite bad. And from the perspective of the victor, I'd say it's going quite marvelously. And this is the problem over and over and over again. And by the way, the more people I meet that I'm with on so many issues, I don't think it's a coincidence that an inordinate amount of them seem to be Marxists.
We're definitely needing a hard shift to the left. We are definitely needing a hard shift with labor more than anything else.
And that's what I'm talking about when I think about, because that's really, when we're talking about Marxism, that's what the proletariat is. It's labor. It's not communism. That came after the fact. It's Marxist-Leninism. It's really the idea of power to the people, power to the working class, power to the proletariat over its owner class. That's what it is. It wasn't a geopolitical thing. It was a labor thing. So when I say but it is interesting the amount of people that I'm aligned with when they're Marxist. And I don't ist myself. I'm not an ist. But there are definitely very many Marxist principles that I do agree with and I do support. Obviously, I support labor and I support that the people should be able to be properly compensated for the means of, of their production.
Yeah, what a noble concept.
Well, I mean, there's just a lot of things about it. And really what Marx did was he analyzed capitalism and its flaws and pointed out some serious flaws.
Well, that's why anybody who's regarded as anything close to a Marxist is immediately discredited, dismissed. That's what happens.
And really all it is adhering to an economic philosophy. It's not a governance. It's an economic philosophy that recognizes the flaws of capitalism when it's put in conjunction with human nature, and just recognizes that an inherently pure capitalist system can't exist without the oppression of the majority of people. That's all it's saying, right? We're not saying, it's not a governance, it's an economic theory. Marx was an economic theorist, a philosopher. So it's like when you say Marxism, people are like, oh, you're a communist. Well, no, that's a political party. Actually, that's a completely different thing. So, and I just feel like it's important. I think words matter. And I think that it's important for people to understand the distinctions. If you're going to call me a socialist or a communist, you should at least be accurate in what you're going to be calling
Well,
me.
most people are not accurate in most of the things that they say politically, but that unfortunately is a lesson learned. And that is why I tend to be more critical of liberals and conservatives. I accept the fact that a lot of conservatives, especially rural conservatives, never had the type of proper education that would teach them a lot of these things.
But look where I grew up, and I wasn't taught properly either.
Well, that's more deliberate than anything else.
Well, I think a lot of this is deliberate.
Oh, absolutely.
Lack of education is all
100%.
very deliberate.
Well, again, the part of the reason why so many people don't understand why conservatives gravitate towards carnival barkers in general is because that is essentially what they were raised in. They were raised in the snake oil world that is politics and religion. Whereas liberals always fancy themselves as being the smartest people in the room. And in reality, they're often the least smartest person in the room because they may have a lot of book smarts, but they have no street smarts. They have no way of reading people. They have no way of identifying issues. And at the end of the day, it's a class war. That's what this is.
Now I have to think about it. I don't think I qualify as a socialist. But here's the thing. If I were to say that I was a socialist, I would say I was an economic socialist.
I'm starting to feel like a preacher now, thanks to Double Check.
We're going to start passing like a jar around. Oh, so this was one thing I wanted to talk about. So, and
I'm getting tired.
Just the term PEP. Okay, guys, we have a new term. It's called a PEP. And a PEP is somebody who's progressive except Palestine. And there actually was another book I had read by Mark Lamont Hill called Except for Palestine. And that's the exact premise. It's like there's so many people that are liberal and progressive except for Palestine. And so they're PEPs. Sort of like, yeah, they're PEPs.
Well, we hope you enjoyed it. Remember, Monday, Chelsea Manning and Rachel Lears. And of course, Friday is the Festivus for the rest of us. So we hope you'll tune in. Make sure you like and subscribe.
I almost feel like we should have some sort of giveaway or something for Festivus. I feel like we should have some sort of contest or prize
to try to get the viewership up.
I think that, but also, yeah, like have a giveaway. Like maybe we give away
a gift. Yeah, we'll come up with like a gift card or
maybe
something.
The person who comes up with the best Festivus miracle. Who has the best Festivus miracle? I don't know. We'll have to come up with some sort of.
Okay, so we're going to do we're going to give away some type of a gift on Festivus. So you better all tune in because you have to be watching the live stream in order to get it.
Yeah.
So we'll be picking that person. We'll checking your ideas, all of that. Super chats.
And it will not be a Festivus poll or my vegan meatloaf.
No. But it'll be fun. Good idea. We'll work on that. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Smash the like button, subscribe, do all that wonderful stuff. Get it out there. And we'll see you Monday.
Bye, all.